Hello, friends. Good evening. Once again, this is Shankar Swaminathan from New Jersey. Uh, the reason why I have actually come today before you is to be talking once again about what's going on in Ukraine, Russia, the war. We have not actually talked about it for quite some time, but we can hardly allow the issue to be forgotten, not talked about. It's not just for the sake of talking that I'm here, but to basically address a $1 million question. The war has been actually going on for about 6 months now. Nobody knows how it's going to end, and we can possibly have an intelligent guess, hazard a guess. So that's the reason why I thought I would just come here. But we all, make no mistake that the whole world, Ukraine has the support of the, by and large, the majority of the countries in the world, almost the whole world. Uh, you can count on your fingertips the number of countries that is actually supporting Russia. There are some countries, but I don't really think there is any country which is actually supporting Russia wholeheartedly, because the invasion has been so blatant, and this megalomaniac Putin, who has actually transformed himself from being an autocrat to a dictator, you never know what's actually is going to do. See, after the Second World War, after the nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki by the United States, this nuclear, that language nuclear, the term nuclear bomb or nuclear drops, itself is a taboo. It's a kind of taboo. Nobody has actually even talked about it. People dread to even think about it or talk about it. But this guy Putin has been actually talking about it with him without any impunity. And okay, there we will actually address that question a little later. But when we are going to talk about how the war is going to end, we can only hazard a guess, as I said. But history is possibly the best teacher, as we have already, as I have mentioned before too in my presentation. So let's actually take a few wars that have happened in the past. Second World War actually went on for about 6 years almost, because the ultimate megalomaniac, Adolf Hitler, um, is quite a destructive element, so to describe. Um, Even at the, wouldn't actually mind losing even his own life, but he was bent upon extending the war, because he didn't really want to face the possibility of losing the war at any stage, even when all the odds were against Germany. So that's the reason why they were actually fighting on and on in the Israel Soviet Union against the communist Joseph Stalin at that time. So the war was made to actually prolong in a very artificial fashion, ultimately with the inevitable result that the Russians were on the borders of Germany, and Hitler had no alternative but to commit suicide. Okay, so this is a very classic tendency of the classic reaction of an ultimate dictator, a fellow with an antisocial personality disorder, a fellow who is so desperate for victories and desperate, and he doesn't really mind annihilating the whole world actually to carry out his own whims and fancies. Okay, such people are so unrealistic. They live in their own dream world with their own fantastic ideas. Unfortunately, the whole of the masses, the whole entire human race has to suffer on account of the existence of such dictators. Okay, there is nobody before Hitler who was as bad as Hitler, as bad and as ruthless as Hitler, a dictator, and nor has there been anybody after Hitler who could be as ruthless as him. Not even Putin. Hitler, had he had a nuclear bomb, I have absolutely no doubt he would have dropped it. Instead of, ultimately winning the war was his ultimate aim. So he would not have actually thought twice before dropping a nuclear bomb so that he can have the upper hand. Now, in the case of Putin, Putin has actually been talking, but I do have a feeling that it's a case of kind of saber rattling, and I don't really think he's going to do that, because I don't think he's really so irrational as to be dropping a nuclear bomb, but he's so childish and naive as to believe that the whole world is going to be taken in by his threat. Okay, it's a kind of just a threat he's doing, but I mean, Joe Biden is perfectly capable of talking back in the same vein, to the same extent, with the same vehemence. Okay, so that's the reason why Joe Biden has actually said what is likely to happen. It seems they also had some kind of back channel talk, not exactly diplomacy, and the message has been conveyed to Putin as to what is likely to happen if he tries to even carry out the threat. But the problem here is Putin has made a very great blunder in invading Ukraine. He characteristically seemed to have absolutely underestimated the resolve of the Ukrainians, particularly Zelensky, the most inspirational leader ever to have emerged after Winston Churchill. So Putin has characteristically underestimated the resolve of Ukrainians who are fighting to, with all the strength and determination that they have. So the war is actually prolonging. Let's actually take the other war, which is Iran-Iraq war, which were actually waged by two madmen on two sides. One, Ayatollah Khomeini on one side, and Saddam Hussein on the other side. These are people who do not really care about the loss of lives, even if in millions, they don't really care. Okay, so that's the kind of people they are leading the two countries. So Iran-Iraq war. So it actually went on for about more than 10 years, I think, almost, and millions of lives were lost. So many people lost their limbs. Okay, the suffering was untold, absolutely, human suffering. All what for? I mean, that's the kind of leaders you had. Okay, so that's what it is. That's what happened in Iran-Iraq war. But take the other one, the war which has been actually fought between India and Pakistan 2-3 times, I think. Yeah, 1965 and 1971. I can actually talk about the 1971 war, which lasted just for about 14 days, and India was the victors and Pakistan was the vanquished. Okay, so it's a very, there is no just alternative but for the war to come to an end, because there is a clear victor. So the vanquished has no alternative but to surrender and actually give up. So that's what happened in the case of India-Pakistan war. So similarly, you can actually talk about the Korean war, which also went on for quite some time, but eventually there was a truce. So there has to be some kind of sense prevailing in any war situation if the war were to end within a reasonable amount of time. Now in the case of Ukraine and Russia, what I actually see is Ukrainians are absolutely determined and they bet their lives upon it, and the kind of patriotism and determination is absolutely admirable. And so they have been able to put up a very, very effective fight, and they have been able to give back to the Russians in the same coin and in equal measure, to the extent that they have been able to retrieve the territories lost. Now they got a great leader, they got tremendous motivation, a great fighting force there, exceptionally good citizenry, the quality of citizenry, with tremendous patriotism, and absolutely admirable. There is no doubt about it. But then the reality is that Russia is a much bigger country and Ukraine is a much smaller country. Ukraine, and in terms of, now they say that actually the inflation rate in Ukraine is about 45%. How long they would be able to sustain the war? That's a question, actually. Both economically, militarily, etc. But then there is a question of more serious principle involved here. No, see, as Narendra Modi, Indian Prime Minister, has actually cautioned Putin, these are not days of war. The days of war are over, actually. Okay, it's not like in the Roman period when people used to fight wars just for the heck of it, actually. For the king to prove his macho image and to prove that he's a much more powerful king, he would wage a war with the neighboring country. Those days are absolutely gone. We are not living in those times anymore. So, Modi waited for some time, India. At the right moment, he did caution Putin. He has told him in categorical terms that these are not days of war. I mean, it only amounting to convey the point that it doesn't really make any sense to be waging a war. So, uh, Putin is in a kind of blind. He's in a kind of corner. He has been cornered. Okay, he's so desperate, and that poses a danger. See, the problem is when such people who have such a great dictatorial mindset, they are forced to a desperation. They are pushed to a corner. You never know how they are going to respond or react to this, because he doesn't want to lose at all any cost. But the difference between Putin and Hitler is that Hitler had no great interest in his own survival. Okay, Hitler was a kind of destructive force, a fellow who did not actually mind annihilating his own self. Okay, that's the reason how he was able to have a very hearty feast before he committed suicide. Okay, characteristically in psychological terms, they say when someone has a propensity to commit suicide, he becomes so disinterested in everything. He becomes so despondent, disinterested. He becomes so depressed, and he loses all the materialistic interest. But that's not the case in the case of Putin. He's full of life still. Okay, he wants to live his life, but he's got some ideals about the kind of Soviet empire he wants to re-establish, and possibly visualizing himself as a modern Tsar, okay, emperor. Okay, that's the thing. So he's being so unrealistic and stupid. That's stupid and absolutely to consider him unwise would be quite charitable to him, but he's being stupid. Now he doesn't have people to send, so he is actually going on a wild drafting drafting plan among the citizens of Russia. So, okay, now, so addressing the crux of the issue, which is how the war is likely to end. As I said, there is a question of principle involved here. The more powerful country cannot just walk into another nation trying to invade, okay, with its military power. That's one principle, basic principle. Now, and the Western powers, America, UK, all of those Western powers have deep stakes in this actually. They cannot allow Putin to ride roughshod over all of those principles and just walk into Ukraine and take it over completely, which is just impossible, as it has been proved adequately, more than adequately. So, as long as the Western powers have the conviction and the determination and earnestness to support Ukraine militarily, Ukraine is going to wage a fight, a very stiff fight at that, and eventually they may win. And mind you, Zelensky has a wholehearted support of all of its citizens, Ukraine. It's not the case with Russia, Soviet Union. It's not the case with Putin. Okay, so there are 2-3 ways by which the war can end. Either Putin has to be deposed, or the military generals within Russia, at least a couple of them, or 2 or 3 of them actually, should have the courage to come up openly against Putin, rise in revolt. That's number 2. Or the population, there is a simmering discontent there in Russia. You cannot really deny that. And the population rising in revolt against the Russian dictator, Putin, he would like to suppress it completely. But such kind of suppression has never worked anywhere, neither in Iraq, nor in Libya, nor any of those countries. Okay. So when the people rise in revolt, as you saw in all of these East European countries before, which were all part of Warsaw Bloc under the Soviet Union, all of them actually crumbled like a pack of cards. So similarly, such a thing could happen within Russia itself. So that is one possibility. When Putin's hands are essentially weakened considerably. That's number 1. Otherwise, the Ukrainians, when Americans and Westerners are prepared to give more advanced weapons to Ukrainians, they could possibly gain an upper hand very clearly, so that they would be able to regain the lost territories, and Zelensky would have the upper hand. And Russia may be left with no alternative but to give up or enter into some kind of face-saving compromise through the offices of countries like Turkey or Saudi Arabia. Okay, so these are the countries that have been effective as mediators and acceptable as mediators, actually between both by Putin and Russia. So that's another possibility. The third possibility I really dread to think, which I do think it's not in the realms of possibilities, which is if Putin tries to carry out a limited nuclear attack, drop a limited nuclear bomb, or I'm not an expert on that, but I have actually read somewhere that there is some kind of possibility for dropping a limited nuclear bomb or whatever. Okay, anything nuclear. If Putin actually decides to go that route, then that's actually going to pose a big conundrum for the all of those Western powers, and they would simply not know how to respond to that actually, because Ukraine would not be able to respond to that materially. So it would be up to the Western powers to do that. Now, if Putin can actually do that just once, that will actually bring the war to an end. I have no doubt about it, because nobody is going to have the gumption to continue to wage the war even beyond that. So that would actually bring the war to an end. But I really dread to think. After that, Russia is going to take a beating politically, all over that. They are going to become the pariahs, international pariah. There is no doubt about it. They are not going to have the support of even China, because China would always like to keep the Western powers in their corner. Okay, so that's one thing. So, but I really dread to think. And I'm not sure, because Putin, when he becomes so desperate, when he becomes so exasperated, when he feels that there is no way by which he can actually win through conventional methods, would he actually resort to that? And he has actually talked to that. The moment he talks, somebody raises an issue, talks about it, there is at least a glimmer of such a thought in his mind actually working. He keeps thinking about it. When somebody starts thinking about something, then it actually gets magnified over a period of time. Then the idea may actually get consolidated in his psyche, in his mind, and he may decide to actually try it out. Okay, that's one thing which I really dread, and that's the reason I'm really happy that the Americans have said that they cannot actually take this one lightly, and they are going to take it quite seriously. And that's the reason why they seem to have actually sent word to Putin as to the consequences of such a drastic, reckless step, if he ever contemplates and decide to go ahead with this. Okay, I wish it were not true. Thank you very much. God bless you all.